that beautiful bridge instead, and which was actually better. It looked like a chapel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
happy accidents would happen.
I like that. Well, Maria, I have one for you. I noticed in the credits that Edgar Allan Poe's name came up. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what influence his work had on your film.
Yeah, first, thank you for having me, and I'm really grateful to be here. And Mirta, I loved your film. I'm a former dancer, so I was really
Oh,
like
thank
inspired, and I
you.
loved it. I knew
Oh,
what they were
good.
doing. I could tell they were real dancers.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to acknowledge that first. Yeah, so the script came about. And really, sorry, my cat is grabbing at this table here. Um, the script came about because I was living in LA and by myself, and I got COVID very early on um, in the whole pandemic. It was April of 2020, so it was pretty severe, and I was alone. And so I don't know if any of you know LA or from LA, but what happened during the pandemic is everybody disappeared. And when you're in a major city where there are a lot of homeless and mentally ill, that's who's taking over the streets. And so it became a really dark place to be alone. And when I finally said I need to leave, I need to really go somewhere and just kind of regroup a little bit, put my things in storage and get out. But before I did that, I wrote just super organically this story because I felt like we were all kind of not alive and not dead. We were kind of in this no man's land. Every day was the same. There was no poetry, no art, no theater, no music. And it felt like this empty place surrounded with zombies kind of thing. I just said, oh, it felt very dark to me. And so I've always been drawn to Poe and his use of language and the sounds that were used. The first line of that and the last line in the stanza are both from a story called The Fall of the House of Usher. And it's about sound during the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day. And so I really kind of built on that idea of sound and a feeling through the sounds of the words. I wrote the script knowing that I was going to be moving to Port Townsend, and I said, if I'm going to leave, I'm going to really make something from the story. And when we shot it, and I wrote, it was, I borrowed a lot from Poe, but I also created my own lines that kind of matched it so it could tell a story. But after we shot it and I was putting it together, I realized pretty quickly that I needed more to flesh out the story. And I found more using H.P. Lovecraft. And I don't know if you all know, he's a long deceased kind of horror, gothic, cosmic writer. And he wrote about being outside and living on the edge of society. And so I used his story, The Outsider, and some poetry from Byron. So I actually ended up combining 3 different authors and putting my, kind of words in between to kind of draw them together and create a story from that. So that's where that came from. So it won the script has won a couple of awards. So I'm very grateful. It was a complicated process to do because the voiceover was done very separately from the rest of the film. Yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations. It's extremely well done. And I found it so interesting that you both brought up how COVID either influenced or affected your production. And you brought in all the other art forms to help express that, the poetry, the dark poetry, and then the beautiful lighthearted dancing. I mean, it's just such a great combination of arts in your films. And I really appreciate that. So we have a question from Mared. Where did you find your dancers? Are these dancers we can see on stage in New York, for example?
Oh, yeah. Well, Maria is a friend of mine. And she has performed in New York. She's been in several off-Broadway shows. She performs regionally. I'm sure she'll be on Broadway very soon because she's very talented. Michael is in Aladdin on Broadway already. Wow. So he's in the cast of Aladdin. So, that's why it was so hard to schedule everything, because even though it was only 2 people, they're working, when theater reopened in New York, Aladdin reopened. So now I had to work around Michael's show schedule. And then Maria got hired for West Side Story in Florida. Of course she did. Who wouldn't want to hire her? She's gorgeous and she's talented. So she disappeared for a few months. And so I had to constantly, make sure I could reel them back to get at least, try to get at least 1 or 2 days where we could all be together to shoot the next segment. But of course they're working because they're talented. So it's hard when you have talented friends. They
Yeah.
they work, but
It's a
but they
blessing and
were
a curse.
still they were still very committed to doing it. Thank goodness. Because if I lost one of them, I would have to start all over again.
Mhm.
Have to have the same couple.
Now that being said, who did the choreography?
I did.
Oh, do you have a background in choreography then, or?
Yeah, I was a professional dancer for 20 years. And then I became, gradually became a choreographer, and now I direct live theater and choreograph. And of course, during COVID, like Maria said, there's like nothing going on. And, this concept, this song, I discovered it a few years ago, and I started choreographing to it a few years ago, just up until the marriage proposal. I only did the first minute and a half of it, and for another project, and then I never finished it. And then I thought, well, maybe now's the time to finish it. I don't have anything else going on because theater is shut down. And like Maria said, New York became a ghost town. It was really weird around here, and it still is. Like, we're still feeling it a little bit. But to see all the theaters shut down and all the lights off is a little unsettling. So I thought, well, let's put it together now. So I choreographed the last half of it, and I figured out how to put it on film. I've never made a film before. This was my first time. So I thought, well, I might as well learn a new skill while we're not doing anything. So I learned, how to shoot film and how to edit. And I had the perfect group of friends who were willing to help me, my dancers, and another friend of mine who was also learning videography, and everyone jumped in and helped me, and I learned a lot. It was an interesting process putting one of my pieces on film. It's a different way of telling stories.
Yes, well, congratulations. It's an amazing first effort.
Oh, thank you.
So Maria, our question is, we were noticing that in every shot you were having to change the makeup and the lighting. So can you explain your process? How did you adapt to each of those?
Right. So the idea is that she didn't know she was dead. And so as the film went on, she would kind of decompose more and more. And I don't know if you've all seen American Werewolf in London, but Rick Baker, who's a Academy Award-winning makeup designer, he designed the character who dies in the very first scene, and who comes back and tells his friend, be careful, you're going to turn into a werewolf. But every time you see him, he's more and more decomposed. And I use that as kind of a springboard for what happens to her. So we see her as she realizes what's happening. We see her kind of coming apart. So that was the crux for that whole section for the film, and that part of it. I really wanted to make this a work of art, so I hired an artist, a makeup artist who was for 6 seasons the lead makeup artist for the show Grimm. And so we came up with a plan of because you don't typically shoot in order. We had to plan how much time it took, at least minimum an hour between each setup, and we couldn't do makeup, take it off, and do it again. We had to actually add more. So we had to plan, shots that were done with less makeup to more makeup. So that was a really complicated process. And then there was only one time where we really had to wait, which was the car scene, where she transformed from, the third look to the fourth look. By the time you see her one way, and then when the car goes through her, you see her another way. And that took about 90 minutes. So, and we lost a lot of light. So we were like, okay, go, we were doing that. But it was it took a lot of planning because it wasn't a typical narrative film. You know, it was really about how we're going to pace it, how long the shots were going to be, does it go along with dialogue, and how the makeup was going to be applied, who we needed that day. And we shot at so many different locations for a 9-minute film. So we really had to be efficient about how we were planning everything. So typically you shoot, you know, 3 days in one location and then move to the next one. We really couldn't, we didn't have that kind of luxury. So we had to really, we did a lot of pre-planning. It was, you know, months and months and months of pre-production planning and working with the city. Fort Worden is a military fort, so I had to work with them. It's just also a state park, so I had to get permits and approval from the Washington State Parks and the city of Port Townsend, who was fabulously cooperative. I cannot overestimate how much the community and the city worked with me to make this happen and allow me to take over the streets in the town and all the different locations that we used, the shop owners, everything else. So it was quite a coordinated process.
Yes, very detailed. I imagine that was difficult to put together, but it comes together so flawlessly that, you know, it's very well done. I'd like to throw this one to both of you. How long did it take you to shoot and then to edit your film? So whoever wants to chime in first.
I guess I'll answer that. To shoot my film, it's hard to say since I had to meet my dancers 4 times during the year. I originally, you know, it was a piece I created in a dance studio first. So I choreographed the last half of it, and then I brought my 2 dancers into a studio. We had 2 rehearsals in the studio in May of 2021, and then at the end of May, we took a day, a morning really, to shoot the first segment, which was the spring segment, which was childhood into teenager, which is up to the marriage proposal. Then in July, we met again and shot another morning, maybe a couple hours in the morning, to shoot the wedding into the young parenthood segment. The longest part of that shot was I asked my videographer to slide down the slide to be the child, you know, because the eye is filling in everyone else in their life is just the 2 of them, but you kind of picture everyone else around them. So, you know, she was sliding down the slide, passing the iPhone to Michael. Michael would swing it around, give it back to the videographer, my friend Stephanie, and then Stephanie had to back up. And we were like, let's try to do this in one take. So there were little challenges with things like that. Plus, I had to get to work. So it was like, we got to be done by this time. So, so we shot that in a couple hours in July. And then in December of 2021, we got the fall segment, which was another morning. And we shot the whole thing. We forgot the wedding ring on her finger. So we had to go back to the apartment, go back up to the park, get stuck in traffic. We finally got the shot because I didn't want the wedding ring to be missing. And it was all the continuity. It's like, I can't believe we didn't notice we forgot the ring. But that's an important detail. So it took longer than we wanted it to, that shoot. But again, we kept it down to a couple hours at least. And then in January of this year, we shot the last segment by Bethesda Fountain, and the playground also. And that didn't go as long because it was so cold outside and there weren't that many people. So we could get the shots we wanted without too many obstacles in the way. So I guess my long-winded answer is it took us a few hours, but over the course of a year, because we had to do it with each season. But every shoot was maybe 2.5 hours at the most, because they were only snippets of their lives that we were doing each time we got together. The editing process, you know, I'm new at it. So, but each time we shot a segment, I would start to edit it. So during the course of the year, I was slowly editing it and piecing it together. So I guess that technically took a year too, but not really, because you edit it and then you're done until we got together again for the next segment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to say how long that process actually took. But from start to finish, the whole process was from May of 2021 to January of 2022 was when we finally finished it. So it was a labor of love. I'm sure Maria can relate to that.
I can.
You just got to get the shots, and
Mm-hmm.
you make it happen regardless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my process was, obviously it was a different kind of film.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the script and I finished it in September, October of 2020. By November, I launched. I had moved to Port Townsend, Washington, and that's where my parents live, by the way. They've been there for 25 years, and I've been there many times. So when I wrote it, I was envisioning where I was going to be and where I was going to shoot. So I actually had the locations in mind. I didn't need to scout, too much. So I was doing pre-production from, the second I got there, October, until, gosh, we did the first window of shooting just maybe 6 months later, like March and April. We did 4 days of shooting, but I had to do the casting, the permitting, and everything else in between. So I was pretty busy. I would say that our longest day was the day on the fort, where she's walking through the trees, and then she goes to the remains of the fort and into the tunnel. And by the way, that tunnel was already there, that said heaven on it. It was right there, and it was already written on. And I said, this is just this crazy. We need to. So we had to drive this. We could only get a permit to drive one car into the dirt roads. It was a walking path, and we had to drive all the gear in with multiple loads, and had a generator because we were out in the woods. So
Wow.
it was a long process just to set up. So half the day was just kind of, even though we started at 7 a.m., it was like an enormous setup process to get out in the middle of nowhere. And then the tunnel scene where she's fighting against the sides of the tunnel, it probably took about well over 6 hours to shoot that scene, because we had to set up the lighting. We had to make sure that we were, fully powered. We had to do our makeup, and we had to block the tunnel on both ends. And so it was really windy that day, and it was raining, and we had all our PAs and our crew laying against the tarps on both ends. And if there was any kind of speck of light, they would have to, like, you can see you in the far left corner, and when they had to block the lights, we had to do take and take and take so we could get her back and forth. And by the end of it, she was fully bruised. The jacket was totally like dirty and chalked, and so that took a lot. We were hoping to get it all done in a week, and then we did not have time after so much time at the fort to do the theater scene, which to me was the most important part of it, because it was all about her and her journey. But when you bring the theater scene in, you bring it out to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was about saying, lost souls. And so I got the crew to come back, and we shot, 2 months later, and that was indoors. So we got a permit to shoot inside the Wheeler Theater on the fort grounds. And we had a drone inside the theater, and that light that's on the stage, and you can see it's kind of an ambient light. We borrowed from the local theater group, their ghost light, their stage ghost light. We borrowed it. I wish we could have had it in the shot, but it was just the way that this was set up. It was just perfect. But it was this beautiful, like, old antique ghost light sitting on the middle of the stage. And you kind of see it in the beginning when you first kind of zoom in to the theater scene. So that took a full day, like 10 hours, just that shot, just getting that shot. We had, extras, setting up the lights, making sure it was enough light to see, but not too much where we could still get the idea of darkness. We got, it wasn't a fog machine, but it was why am I blank on what the machine was? But it was we got the smoke that we wanted, but we can still see people through it. It was a smoke machine of some kind. And so we had to get extra gear, and go back onto the fort and shoot that scene. So it was quite a bit of work. And I would say that most of our work was actually in post-production. That took the most effort. This project for me was a work of art. It was about sound, music, visual. So I hired a composer who's done, films for Netflix, Warner Brothers. He did the soundtrack for the film Krampus, Trick or Treat, this Flowers in the Attic. He's done a lot of kind of like the tense horror films. And so I hired him to compose the score, and he hired an orchestra in Budapest, Hungary, and it was recorded live in Hungary with a live orchestra. We got obviously the makeup person was a high-end person that we got and the voiceover was my daughter, who's a professional actor living in England, and she does voice work and she records books for Audible. So she is the one who did all the voiceover, and that was, she probably did 30 different versions, and it was really difficult. So the post was really about pacing the sound, recording the voiceover, getting the right sound sweetening and sound effects in there. So we hired a sound effects group out of Northern California to do all the sound effects and do all the mastering. And then we had our composer doing all that stuff. So it was really, the process of shooting was maybe like a little over a week total, planning for like 6 to 8 months. And then the post-production was probably another 7 months, really long. We had to have special effects to do where she went through the doorway. We hired an effects person to do that as well. So I'd say, it was a lot of technical work on my part to really get it done, starting in the summer of 2020 through February of 2022. So almost 2 full years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, very, very well done. Let me throw this one back to Marette. So as far as the camera work from the point of view of the child, was that your intention from the beginning, or was that kind of a last minute choice you made?
No, that was my intention from the beginning, was to have just the couple and we see their life together. And everyone else that's in their life, the observer can fill them in. So we know other people are there. Maybe at her wedding, for example, her father is walking her down the aisle, but you fill that in. So I really wanted to convey their child, though, from the child's point of view, so you could really understand what was going on in the storytelling. And the car door also was something my videographer came up with. She said, we should see the car door shut. And I said, that's a great idea. So we know that the child is grown up and moving out of the house and going off to college or whatever the life of that child continues to be. But my whole intention was to have just the 2 dancers and their story, and everyone around them is filled in by the observer.
Great. Well, again, you both made beautiful films, very, very impactful. So I'm excited to hear what you're working on next as filmmakers. Anyone working on something right now they would like to share?
I am. I'm actually working on 2 projects at the moment. I have a pilot script that I've been working on with a showrunner for Netflix. It's a teenage indigenous superhero story, kind of a young adult theme. So I've been working on it for well over a year, but the script is getting turned in November. So we're really like, I know she's already seen the book and the pitch and the first 15 pages. So I said, okay, I need to get this done so we can work on it and see where we take it. So that's the first project. The next is I'm working on a documentary with Game Changer Films. I'm the co-producer for that, and it's a climate justice doc about what's happening with our climate and how poor communities, low-income communities, people of color are the ones bearing the brunt for the climate change. They're the ones their communities are the ones suffering the most. So we're really excited about telling that story, showing the impact.
Oh, very intriguing. We'll keep our eyes out for both of those. What about you, Marette? What will you be doing next?
Well, right now, I do plan on doing another film, but right now I'm working in live theater again. Um, we are in rehearsals for an off-Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish,
Nice.
which we
Wow.
did. Yeah, we did this back in 2018 and 2019 off Broadway. Now we're remounting it for another run off Broadway in a different theater. So I'm immersed in live performance at the moment, but I'm hooked on filmmaking now too. So I do want to make another one because I learned so much, and it's such a great way to express yourself um, in a different genre outside of the live theater format. It's a great skill to have, and I just love it too. I've really fallen in love with it. It's just a matter of coming up with the idea. I was very fortunate with the last one. The song, for some reason, just told me what to do. I never had any question in my mind what to do with it. The idea just came to me, and I just knew what to do. It was just one of those songs for me. So I need to find something else that inspires me that way, whether it's a script or another song or something that a friend of mine may compose, or a choreography I want to do that I haven't gotten around to yet. It will happen at some point. I'm just not sure when. I have to get Fiddler on the Roof on stage first. But it's really such a rewarding way to create art. And and Maria, I agree with you completely. We're in this to create art, and not, there's so much love put into your work. I could see all the attention to detail. It was really quite stunning.
Thanks.
So congratulations. It's beautiful work, and it's such a joy to be here. I must thank you. It's an honor to be selected for this festival.
Yes.
Are you going to be in Texas? Are you traveling to Texas?
Not. I don't have any plans to go that way in the near future. But if I am, I will definitely have to let you know. My sister used to live there. She's not there anymore, though. But I do have friends who live in Dallas.
Excellent. Well, we're a Dallas-based festival, so if you're in the area, feel free to stop by.
Yeah.
Congratulations again to both of you. Wonderful, wonderful work. If anyone is interested in continuing their conversation, you can always jump into our cafe from here and chat and enjoy yourselves as much as you'd like. We are going to wrap up the Q&A, but I would love for you to join us tomorrow. We will be doing our narrative film block from 6 to 8. If you're interested in joining us and seeing some more incredible films. Thank you again. You can see the emojis. We're just so grateful that you were here with us and that you answered our questions and you shared the work from your heart with us. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us into this festival. It really was a pleasure.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.
Thank you, and have a great night.
You too. Thank you.